Okay, so this lesson here is about using a wet medium to create a simple still life. We're going to do a little drawing here. We learned how to crosshatch and develop values, right? And now we're going to design a drawing and crosshatch the values into the drawing. Okay, we have a choice here as to which subject matter to do. I think I'm going to choose between these two. I'll probably use this with the wash. Do the skull with the wash technique. So, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to draw this particular still life with these three objects: the pear, the apples, and the background with the folds in it. Okay, so we've learned that the pen and ink is a very slow medium, right? And we have to be careful as to managing the ink, making sure we don't load up the pen too much, make sure our pen is clean. Okay, so now I'm going to delineate the extent of my drawing, right? I'm going to draw in the master cube, nice and square to the page, right? This is the outside perimeter. Okay. I'm just gliding the pen tip along the surface of the paper. And so the approach to the drawing is the same as with the charcoal, right? So I'm going to delicately establish the master cube so we can visualize the space and see the way I've smudged that. Visualize the space. Okay. Right? And so the fold in the wall where the cloth bends is right about here. Right? Our cloth is coming this way and towards us and away from us. Okay, the space is moving towards us. Right? I got a feel for the space. So I want to make sure my objects are nice and big in relationship to the space itself. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to set that the pear, the footprint right about here, right? And the pear is going to be pretty large, right about there, right? I'm going to go around it. Nice and easy. Right? And that interesting stem there. Okay? So that locates that object, and our light source is from left to right. Okay? So I can establish that shadow area here just delicately. Okay? And then there's a distance between these two, so the apple is way up in front here, right? With the footprint right about there. Okay, the height of the apple is about like that. Okay, and I'm going to go around her. Okay, it's a little wider here. All right, so we're looking down. That stem is right about there. Okay. And then we're going to locate the shadow area. So the light source is coming this way. It's flaring out a little bit. So the shadow area is right out here. Okay, and then the other apple is set back just a little bit. So let's locate that. So the footprint is going to be right about there. We'll make it about that tall. Right. And we're looking down at the apple, so the stem is right about there. Okay, and now this shadow area, right? So it's going to come out on the shadow. Look how long the shadow is because it's further from the light. Okay, and now I have a nicely designed little still life. Okay, and so now I'm going to get into adding the values, right? So the first thing I do is I'm going to work on that background to harness the light, right? We're going to, and so here I go. And I'm drawing up to the light. So the approach is the same as with charcoal, right? We're establishing our dominant directions. We're going to be cross-hatching, changing our directions to develop the values, right? But first I'm going to work along my dominant direction. Just gliding the pen, aiming. We're working towards a smooth effect. Okay. Space is moving towards us, right? Make sure we don't load up too much ink. I want to avoid blotching. But if it happens, it happens. It's the characteristic of the medium, you know. Sometimes the blotching actually makes the drawing look kind of interesting. Adds another life dimension to it. Okay. Right, so I'm working on that background. Maybe even changing the angles already slightly. Okay. Pulling the lines, drawing, drafting. Okay. And see the way I have a rhythm with my wrist. Putting those lines down, very important. It's a very busy type of drawing. You're always busy putting down lines. Really looking at your values. You can pick up the direction of the light even. Okay, this area over here is going to be real dark, right? And you want to go and change your directions. Always change your directions. If you go in the same direction all the time, it's going to clog. Your drawing will clog up very quickly. So you can see how much work it takes to just develop those values. Okay. Changing my line direction a little bit. See, and there's an advantage to having the paper not taped down, so you can, it helps you navigate those line angle changes, right? So now I'm going to pick up the closer to the direction of the light. You want to change those line angles right away. quickly into the drawing. And you can see how the shadow area is going to, again, support those objects. Picking up the direction of the light. Okay. All right. So now let's identify the shadow areas a little bit better. Cross-hatching the value into there. And the drawing is going to be light to dark, right? So left to right. Notice how I don't have any dark areas yet. I'm keeping my values nice and under control, working from light to dark. Ooh, look at that, right? So there we have a little blotch. Okay. And we can let that dry. Try to pick it up without making more of a mess like that. Okay. And immediately kind of stamp it out, manage it. At the end of the drawing, you won't even see that. Okay, so that means I have to manage my tip a little bit, make sure it's cleaned up. Okay, and back I go. That's not a setback. It's in the dark area of the drawing. We won't even see that later on. Mark my words. And the ink is going down nicely. My pen is working nicely. It's because I have the right combination of ink, right? Ink, paper, tip. Okay. Okay, now let's look at the objects themselves, right? I'm going to follow with the dominant direction. Pulling the lines. I'm going to first establish this direction. The pear is curved. Okay, there's the pear. Beautiful. Okay, let's just... Okay, and then we're going to go the other direction, going around the object. Okay, but first let's define the other ones. The apples. Okay. Okay, so the apple goes back that way, and also very important. No outlining, no contour lines, just descriptive lines going around the volume. Okay. And it's coming in this way. This way. It's going around this way, down and around. It's very dark there. Okay, but we're just indicating the first values. Okay, so now you can see the drawing starting to appear. Okay, now let's make sure our values are coming up to the edge of the object. Okay, so it's going around, it's coming around this way. Okay, this way, dominant direction, going around the object. Okay. Stem is coming out. And as the values are similar, it's sometimes hard to see the forms, differentiate the forms, but you gotta kind of have to trust the process. Okay, so I'm gonna go back up in here and establish some of these folds that are in the cloth, just to indicate them, begin to see them. So, and these soft transitions, you have to start lighter and then back away, kind of like we did with a gradient. It's a mini gradient there from light to dark. So always working to keep the values smooth. Changing my directions, aiming for the hot spots. Right, so the whole area in the back is going to be from left to right. It's going to be pretty dark. So I got my work cut out for me. And you can see how much work this requires. There's thousands of lines here to create those values. It's a very, very deep medium. In other words, you can create the value nuances as long as you maintain your technique, changing the line directions, cross-hatching properly. Okay. Still working here. The drawing will focus more and more as you get into it. In the beginning, it's a little out of focus, right? We're working from light to dark, knowing that it'll come into focus slowly. The location of every line is very precise. It's total control. Okay, looking good. See how it's convenient to be able to rotate the paper. Drawing up to the edge of the light there. You have to be careful not to smudge the drawing by leaning on it. So when you develop values, you got to develop values further away from you and then move away from where you've just drawn. So see how the we've done a lot of work already, right? And we're barely into the deep values yet. Not even close. Right? Look at our gradient. Right? If you compare the values. So it's a very, very busy kind of drawing. You know, you gotta be on it, constantly laying down lines, thinking through what you're doing. Okay, I'm just establishing that value. Okay, looking really good. Okay, so now I can push this back a little bit. Okay. Need to darken this area. This is going to get very dark over here. Okay, now you can start seeing it appear. Okay, now I want to establish this one as another dark fold. I'm going to start a little closer inside the drawing. Aiming, aiming, constantly aiming. Now you can see the drawing starting to smooth out. Yeah. I've done hundreds of illustrations using pen and ink. I love this medium. It's pure drawing, which is wonderful. Okay, now let's go back to shadow values a little bit. Just like in the charcoal drawing, the light left to right, okay? And the shadows are what create the light drama, right? The dark area, it's always beautiful in relationship to the light. One supports the other. Without the dark areas, you wouldn't have light areas, right? So it's essential to establish both. Okay. Okay, so let's look at this shadow. Changing my angle slightly. I'm really starting to aim for smoothing this stuff out, so I'm aiming for the areas that are light. Changing my angles. Okay. Starting to see those shadows. Now let's try to get this pear shadow under here. That pear shadow kind of goes behind the apple, so that's fun. Okay. Okay. Clean the tip a little bit. Getting some of that lint on there. Okay. And you can see where the contrast of that edge is darker than the background edge, so that's where we're at. Establishing the value. I'm going around the object. I'm in that shadow area, right along here. Okay, so working on establishing the pear, going around it. Okay. Okay, you can see those shadows starting to work nicely, right? Beautiful. Okay, now need to deepen this area right here between the apples. Doing everything possible to smooth things out, aiming for the hot spots. And you don't want to make any sudden moves with your pen. It'll blotch, it'll drip. All right, so you want to make sure we have just enough ink. Don't overload your pen. Okay, now we're starting to really see the light in the drawing. Okay, what are we gonna do? We're gonna move on to maybe working a little bit more on the pear here. Right. And it's There's also a shadow core right there. Okay, so we're gonna, can really see it right now. Nice. Okay. Looking good. I can go in here and draw some of this shadow. Deepen it. Probably have about 5,000 lines in there already. Think about it. Okay. Starting to appear. And it's all about the light. Creating the light in the drawing. The purpose of the drawing. Life and light. In order to create those soft transitions, right? It's like we created our gradient from light to dark. You got to move away with your value, right? So now I'm closer to my darker values. And the shadow core is right along in there, but we still need to establish the value on the apple. Notice I'm always going around the volume. And I'm always looking at these value changes. Look how it's bright up here compared to the background, and then as you go down, it gets darker. So okay. Now I'm going to keep pushing on the apple here. And I can see this shadow core real dark in there. But I need to pull this down still. Okay. Now I can start working on that shadow core. Right along there. Change my direction. The first layer of lines. I'm going around the volume. Okay. Okay. Looking good. Okay. Trying to be careful not to smudge the drawing at this point. Got a lot of time invested in it. Trying to establish that shadow core. See how long it takes? Crisscrossing, cross-hatching, making sure things don't clog up. Okay, let's go down to the shadow area. Now I can identify some of the really dark areas underneath. Nice. Okay, the shadow core starting to fill in. Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. Starting to really look good. Okay, let's see what we can do with this guy now. Okay, so. Okay. Slowly putting in the values. First, you want to establish the first level of values. Okay. I can almost like shorten up your strokes in certain areas. Okay. Now let's See, this whole area's got to go back and pushed back. See, it's lighter and then darker here, so. Light to dark. And this is where you want to make sure that your drawing was designed properly, because you've spent so much time developing this, okay? If your drawing is not designed properly, it's going to be a futile attempt at creating something that's of any value. And you can see how much darker that shadow needs to be, that whole area. And there's no way other than to change your line direction. Look how smooth it's starting to appear, right? The only way to get that is to constantly change your line direction throughout your whole drawing. You got to trust it. It looks horrible in the beginning, but as long as you know where you're going with it, right, you have the confidence to understand that this technique will bring you to the right effect. Your strategy, your approach. If you stick to it, your desired outcomes will be within reach. Interesting to count how many lines it actually takes to create a drawing like this. Quite a few. See how I'm pulling that value this way. And we're always doing everything possible not to spill the ink. It inevitably does at some point or another spill. But today we're trying to manage that. I'm not going to make it too dark up front here because the light's hitting it. Hitting that surface. All right. Now look at how that shadow kind of worked itself into within that value. So now let's go back and reestablish it. It's coming back. That shadow's coming back. Notice that we're handling it the same way as the background. right? It's really looking good. Keep hitting on it here until the values are just right. Right, I'm just bringing this down slowly. This dark shape. Yeah. Okay. Look at that. Looking good. And we can add the a little different from what it looks like, but that's okay. Okay. Now for that yellow apple. Okay, now let's get this apple done here. We need to darken that along that shadow core still. Alrighty. So here we have still life created with pen and ink. Very, very dark under here. It's the darkest spots underneath the apple, underneath the objects right there. Okay, so we're continuing to finish our drawing. Making sure our pen is clean, ready to go. Like to finish the drawing, right? So that would mean deepening some of these values. Refining, adjusting, smoothing things out. Okay. Checking my value comparisons. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Look at that. Softening the edges here. And here we are. We're running towards the finish line here. Making adjustments. Right, this area can come down quite a bit. Really pushing the light. Okay. Okay, so here we have a still life rendering using the pen and ink technique. Okay. We can make adjustments to it. Nice source of light. Great.